Aaron Thomas is a three-time winner of Atlanta's Best Divorce Attorney, and he's one of the nation's top experts in family law issues. He graduated from Harvard Law School, and he's represented over 1,000 clients, including fancy people like NBA Hall of Famers, Super Bowl winners, and Grammy Award-winning artists. Aaron's done a range of family law matters for his clients, including divorce, custody, child support, and prenuptial and postnuptial agreements. So after years of working with clients for difficult divorces, he launched Prenups.com to help couples establish a solid financial foundation during engagement so they could prevent common marital disputes. Aaron's first book, The Prenup Prescription, was released last year. And we have it here today talking about Love 2.0, prenups, and second marriages. Aaron, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me, Tracy. Very excited to be here.
I know you're always fun to talk to. And so I know that a lot of our listeners are in the process of divorce or they're thinking seriously about divorce. And so the furthest thing from their mind is getting married again. So what does this prenup discussion matter to them? Well, the fact is that probably 35 to 40% of women who get divorced are actually going to remarry someday. So I think it's important for them to think about how they would protect themselves if they did get into a serious relationship again. So with all that being said, a prenup is one of my favorite tools to protect yourself. And I want you, Aaron, the expert, to tell us exactly what a prenup is.
Yeah. Great first question because there are so many misconceptions about even the definition of a prenup. A prenup is essentially a set of rules that determines how you manage your finances, what happens to your money, both during and, if necessary, after a marriage. And you can tell that I am emphasizing that during because one of the most common misconceptions is that a prenup is simply just a plan for divorce and nothing else. And almost nothing could be further from the truth.
Well, how would it be used as a tool during the marriage to manage the finances? Because you're right, everyone, this is just the plan, the roadmap for divorce. And certainly it is for that, right? It helps us untangle the finances if we do get divorced. But how can we use it during the marriage?
Yeah. So there's a number of things, but first off, I mean, the number one thing to start with is for a prenup to be enforceable, and this goes in all 50 states, each spouse has to disclose all of their assets and debts at the very beginning before you put your signature on the paper. And just that act alone, as you and I'm sure many people listening to this know, can do wonders for couples in terms of establishing a habit of transparency right off the bat when it comes to money in your relationship. Certainly, there are people who have been married 10 years, 20 years, longer, who are going through a divorce and have sat in my office and do not know what their spouse earns, do not know where the money is, sometimes don't know even where their spouse banks or where the different types of accounts or investments are held. And so simply getting on the same page in terms of disclosing all of your assets, putting everything out there on paper at the beginning of a relationship can certainly be helpful. That is naturally going to spawn conversations about how did you get there? Why do you have your money, kind of set up this way? So that would be the first thing. And then the second thing is couples talking about how the money is going to flow in the relationship. How are they going to set up? How are they going to structure their bank accounts? So, um, some people do what I call inside out, where all of the income in the household goes into one bank account, and then it kind of flows out from there. Each spouse will get spending money or an allotment, if you will, that comes out of that joint bank account. And other couples, particularly older couples or people going into a second marriage, are more comfortable going outside in, where the income and the money that they have coming in goes into their separately titled bank accounts. And then each spouse contributes to a joint bank account in some agreed upon manner, sometimes proportionately with their income, sometimes 50-50, or some other arrangement.
If a client is asking you for recommendation on which way to do it, do you have a preferred method or is it really situationally dependent?
I think it really is situationally dependent. And what I'll usually do is ask people where are they starting from, right? So some couples are more naturally inclined to do, maybe what their parents or grandparents likely did, which is have one bank account and everything goes in and out of that one bank account. But that can create tension around, arguments about the spending from that bank account, or are you spending too much, or do I not have the same access that you do? And so those couples are probably more likely to feel comfortable with the inside out. The money still goes into that one joint bank account, but then it flows out from there. And then couples who their natural tendency is to keep everything separate are probably more comfortable with outside in. Money goes into the separate bank accounts, and then you contribute to the joint account.
I want to ask about a couple of the things that I think are myths surrounding prenups. And I think that prenup has gotten a bad rap. It's planning for divorce. You're just setting yourself up for failure. I bet you hear that one a lot.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And in fairness, before I practiced family law, if you'd asked me 20 years ago, I probably had the same misconception that all you're doing is planning for your divorce. I think that prenups should be looked at as partnership agreements for your marriage. If you are going into a business partnership with another individual, certainly you are going to try to put some ground rules down on paper, talk about how you're going to run the business, what are each of your rights and responsibilities with respect to the business. And of course, any partnership agreement worth the paper it's written on is going to spell out what happens if a partner leaves the business, right? If somebody walks away or if you need to buy out a partner. But that's not the goal of the business partnership agreement. The goal is to make the business successful, right? And it just so happens that one of the things that kind of takes confusion or worry off the table is talking about, what is the transition plan if the business comes to an end or if the partnership comes to an end. I think that we should take the same approach. We should look at prenups the same way. It's a partnership agreement for your marriage. There should be plenty in there that makes it easier to manage the finances during the marriage itself, that removes confusion about where each spouse stands with respect to the different accounts or the different assets and debts that the couple has. And the same way that you're not planning for failure in a business partnership by including kind of the termination clauses in it, it should be looked at the same way with a prenup. You are just covering your bases, and the same thing we would do with kind of any other venture. You are hoping for the best, but of course you're going to plan against your worst case scenarios too.
That's a wonderful explanation. And I tell people to just think about the prenup as a contract, right? It's just a type of a contract that two people are entering into. And while marriage is not necessarily a business deal, I like to say the divorce certainly is a business transaction.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, whether we like it or not, marriage itself is very similar to a financial contract. There are rights and obligations written into the law about your finances and how it interplays with your marriage. And so, the thing that I like to say is whether or not you have a written prenup, you've got a prenup. If you get married, you have a prenup. It is just your prenup happens to be the laws of the state where you are living at the time rather than something that you and your partner have chosen yourself, that you have intentionally sat down and chosen. These are going to be the rules for our relationship. So I look at it as you are either accepting the default prenup or you are customizing your own.
One of the other big myths I hear people talk about a lot is that a prenup protects the person who makes more money or has more assets. And it's all about protecting them and their money. But I know that a prenup also protects the lower earning spouse, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what you said earlier really is perfect that it is simply a contract. There are good contracts and there are bad contracts. And I think that part of the reason that prenups have such a bad reputation and have all this stigma is the prenups that come to mind when most people think about it is the prenup of you've got some, wealthy older man and you've got some young woman gold digger, for better or for worse, that is what comes to mind for a lot of people. People think about Anna Nicole Smith, if I can, date myself. They think about that as the prenup, and it's just about protecting, the assets of the wealthier spouse. But a prenup is really unlimited in terms of how it can, distribute finances in a relationship. And, most of the prenups that I draft in my practice are simply saying everything that we accumulate together, we're going to split 50-50, no questions asked. Everything that the income that comes in the marriage, we're going to put in 50-50, and whatever we had coming in or inheritance or family money, that stays separate, that stays outside of our relationship. But prenups are very often used to secure the rights of the lower earning spouse in the assets that the couple accumulates together. So certainly they can be used to protect a lower earning spouse.
I know you like to talk about the one paycheck rule. So tell us what that is.
Yes. I think most people have a general sense that if you get married, the assets that you bring into the marriage should be your separate property. They belong to you beforehand, and the assets that you accumulate together are considered your marital property. Those are the things that would be divided in the event of a divorce. In reality, however, it is extremely difficult for that to play out. It is not nearly that simple, and the reason is the one paycheck rule. If the money that you earn during your marriage, that first paycheck is considered marital money. It's considered joint money. It may as well have just been earned by both of you. And so you get married, and most people are going to get that first paycheck, that one paycheck. They're going to take some of it, they're going to put it in their checking. A little bit of it goes into their savings. They may pay down their car note. They may pay on a mortgage of a house they own prior to marriage. Some of it goes into their retirement account. And everything that one paycheck touches, if it was your separate property, it now has a portion of marital property into it. It has been commingled. And so many people have sat in my office, and I'm sure you've had the same type of situation. And they say, but what do you mean? I'm the only one that contributed to this retirement account. I paid the mortgage on this rental property that I owned prior to the marriage with my own money. And we have to explain that, as soon as you're married, it's not just your money. Your paycheck is considered joint money. And so for most people, that first paycheck, that one paycheck, destroys these clean separate property claims that they may have, and it is one of the biggest reasons why people will get a prenup, is to be very clear about what falls into what's mine, what's yours, and what's ours, without needing teams of forensic accountants, hopefully, to sort out later on.
That's awesome. Why is it so much more complicated financially when people are getting married today than it was when our parents got married?
Oh yeah, great question. It is so much more complicated for our generation. And I'll use my parents as an example. My parents got married in the 1960s, and financial lives and marriage looked very, very different back then than it does today. So the average couple getting married in the 1960s, they were age 21 on average. Very, very young compared to people getting married today. Um, that couple back then was likely to have maybe one bank account between the two of them at that time when they were getting married. They likely had no credit cards. They were just coming around only for the very wealthy. 401ks hadn't even been invented yet. Student loans weren't anything like they are today. You could still work your way through school, which is something that is laughable for many of us today. It was very likely that that couple had no equity in a house, had no equity in a business. And so that couple getting married back then, they were like a blank slate. If they were a business, they would be a startup in your garage, a complete blank slate financially. You compare that with the average couple getting married today on a first marriage, they're probably around 30 years old. And each spouse in that relationship is likely to have 4 to 5 bank accounts each, 3 or 4 credit cards each, a couple of retirement accounts. They're likely to have maybe some equity in a condo or a house. They are likely to, they might have a small business. They may have tens of thousands or even 6 figures of student loans. And so the couple who is getting married today, it is way more complex than I think a lot of us think about when you're going into marriage. And if we're going to use the business analogy, it's more like a corporate merger when the average couple today gets married. And so, the idea that you can combine your financial lives without, some real intentional forethought, sitting down and thinking through, who is going to own what, who's going to have access to what resources in your relationship. It is something that deserves, I think, more thought than the average couple getting married today. And that couple, who's getting married at age 30, maybe more importantly than all the assets and debts, they're likely to have a decade of their own financial habits that they have built up since they left their parents' house. And sometimes merging those, disparate financial habits is more difficult than merging the assets and the debts.
And we are talking Love 2.0 today. So, second marriages, the finance can get even more complicated, right? We've got children and stepchildren and child support issues and spousal support issues. There's a lot going on with second marriages.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just like you said, one, you've got people who, are potentially have gone through a divorce. Maybe someone has been burned the first time. Maybe someone feels like they didn't get a fair shake the first time financially. And so, just even wading through all of that to get to the point where someone feels, comfortable enough, vulnerable enough to want to merge, their finances, merge their lives, financially and otherwise with another person, can be difficult. So, from a psychological aspect, certainly there are complexities, but there is also the fact that if you have children, a portion of your resources are going to be dedicated to raising those children. And that's whether you are a person who is paying child support or whether you are receiving child support. And so a lot of people will want to set up kind of a separate bank account. It's not just mine, yours, and ours, but you may have a mine and a mine, B that is for your children's expenses or that will hold child support. The same thing may go for alimony. You're going to have a section of your income that may be going out to pay alimony or an account that is set up to receive alimony that you may not want to mix with the income that is part of, your marital income in this new relationship. You may be moving into someone's home where they've already got some equity, or someone may be moving into your home where you've already been paying the mortgage for a certain period of time. And so figuring out what that looks like. Are they going to pay you rent? Are they going to get a stake in that house, some equity in the house when they move in, or is it going to stay 100%, yours? And these are all things that I think are best addressed in a prenup or postnup, with an experienced attorney who knows kind of how to navigate these waters of going into a separate relationship. Where should the lines be drawn financially in this new relationship?
Okay, one final question for you. For the listener who is out there saying, I'm not against a long term relationship, but never getting married again. If she wants to move in with her partner, they live together long term, can they protect themselves like a prenup would protect them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you are going to be living with somebody, you're going to still run into a lot of the same, kind of like financial questions that married couples do. Particularly when it comes to you're both paying on potentially the same mortgage or the same rent, you're accumulating furniture, and other items together. And for those couples, it's advisable to think about getting a cohabitation agreement, which is kind of like a prenup for a couple that is not getting married, or sometimes people say prenup without the nup, right? Without the nuptial. And you can put in that kind of agreement what would happen if you were no longer living together, or if it came time to sell a piece of property, or if one spouse owned the house prior to the other spouse moving in. How are you going to divvy up equity in the event that either the relationship ends, or you just move out of the house and you sell it and you move to a new place? And it doesn't just apply in the event of a divorce. And so certainly you can go further than that and talk about payment of bills, and how you're going to set up accounts. Sometimes it's still a good idea, or you may want a joint account so you have joint money paying for joint expenses. So cohabitation can sometimes, it doesn't remove all the complexities of a relationship. And so having an agreement in place for that can be a good idea as well.
That's wonderful. You've got a free resource for our listeners. It's a free ebook called The 7 Steps to a Marriage Saving Prenup. Tell me a little bit about it.
Yes, absolutely. I wanted to make kind of an entry point, like an easily digestible, kind of short guide for someone who is going into a relationship, whether it's just living with somebody else or whether it's getting married, or sometimes even if you've been married a long period of time and you want to know how to kind of go back and fix your finances and have a reset. And it kind of lays out the seven most basic steps that will get you and your partner on the same page financially and avoid a lot of the arguments and pitfalls that too many couples run into today.
That's great. We are going to link that in the show notes. We are also going to put a link to your book, The Prenup Prescription. Tell us about that.
Yes, yes, the prenup prescription, and the subtitle to that is Meet the Premarital Contract Designed to Save Your Marriage. And so, for those that want to do a deep dive and really go, maybe you've downloaded the ebook and you say, okay, I like where this is heading. Where can I learn more? That book kind of goes really deep and it goes back into my story. You'll learn what I put in my own prenup with my wife, who is also a lawyer. And some of the stories I think that we lay out in that book will really hit home and resonate for the people listening. And certainly it can be used as a guide so that if you're interested in getting your own prenup or your own postnup in the future, I hope that this could be a great resource for you.
Earned so much valuable information today. Thank you for being here with us and sharing all of your knowledge.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been great. It's been a pleasure.